every time I hear Leigh talk about this, I'm just like, why don't we use this more? And Leigh's got a much longer talk that elaborates on data that really shows the pitfalls and the failures of the way we're currently handling cases. So it just really points to why not try something different? So I'm going to really be brief, because what I would like to do is to paint a picture of the process, the restorative justice process that we've been using in Baltimore for 18 years now, to handle all sorts of different kinds of crimes and conflicts. It's called community conferencing. And hopefully you'll get a sense in painting the picture of how this process works, how this really might be not only applicable, but beneficial for certain kinds of cases of intimate partner violence. So in 1994, I was at a conference in Philadelphia, and I met David Moore from Australia, who was using community conferencing in Australia as a court diversion for many juvenile offenses. They were using it in workplaces. But the process that I learned about then, they had adapted from the Maori in New Zealand. And it was adapted in the Maori culture. They talk about their family group, and this was called family group conferencing. And so for the Maori, your family group are the people in your life who you care about and who care about you. So sometimes it's your blood relatives, and most of the time it's your blood relatives and a whole other group of people in your life who you care about and who care about you, right? And so if something goes awry in the Maori culture, they have these conferences where they sit in a large circle where they include the person who's caused the harm, those who've been harmed, and everybody's respective family group members. So a typical family group conference could be anywhere from like 12 to 40 people. And so in 1998, we started the Community Conferencing Center to do community conferencing, which is pretty much exactly that, is that when harm has been done, whether it's a general conflict or a crime, what we do is we bring together those who've caused the harm and those who've been harmed and their respective supporters, anybody in their life who they care about and who cares about them. So everybody is sitting in a circle with a trained and neutral facilitator to talk about three things. And this is the restorative justice process that Leigh talked about. So instead of asking, like in an adversarial process, we want to know who did it and how can we punish them. With this process, we're asking different questions. We want to know who's been affected, how have they been affected, and how can we repair the harm? A very different set of questions. And so I can tell you that since basically 1995 in Baltimore, 18,000 people have, just in Baltimore City, have participated in a community conference to address a crime or conflict. And in those circles, what everybody knows when they come to that circle, they know that they're going to talk about three things. First, they're going to hear what happened from the person or the people involved in causing that harm. And that's why you have to take a certain amount of, acknowledge some responsibility for what happened, because you've got to talk about what happened. And the second question is that everybody in that circle is going to be able to share how they were affected by what happened. It is by design a very emotional process. If people are angry, they are encouraged to be angry. They are not encouraged to attack anyone else. But it's part of being human. This is the part about introducing a sense of humanity into the justice system. That, damn it, my car was stolen and I was not able to pick up. I was out, there was a single father who at midnight went to the Rite Aid to get medicine for his daughter, and he left the keys in the car and some kid stole the car. And he's in that community conference saying how upset and terrified he was when he came out of there with his medicine and had no way to get back to his daughter. We encourage people to say how they've been affected by this. And then you hear not only from the people who've been directly affected, but you hear from their family members and their supporters. And you hear from the young people who stole the car. You hear from their family, how they've been affected. There are so many people that have been affected when harm has been done that are not typically included in the adversarial in the court system. So everybody gets a chance to say how they've been affected, and then we get to the third question, which is, having heard everything that you just heard, what would you all like to do to repair the harm and prevent this from happening again? And we use this process to divert misdemeanor and felony cases. We use it in schools in an effort to crimp the school-to-prison pipeline. We use it in neighborhoods where there are neighborhood conflicts that have been to court 2, 3, 4 times, and everybody is still so angry at each other. I use it in murder cases, actually not instead of going to court, but 10, 20, 30 years later, when people affected by that murder are still very much feeling the weight of that, because our system does not allow any sense of healing. And so we've used this process, and in the cases where we've done juvenile diversion work, I'll cut to the chase, 95% of the time, the people in the circle are able to come up with a written agreement, and there's 95% compliance with those agreements, and reoffending rates are 60% lower than if they went to court at 1/10 the cost of court. So this is about engaging the wisdom and the humanity, the wisdom of communities and the humanity of each and every one of us, and trusting that if we pull together a larger group of people, which in our society we typically want to separate people and have very small separate groups of people, if we pull together everybody at the same time, we are trusting that within that circle there's going to be some wisdom and capacity to figure out how to move forward. So why not try it with incidents of intimate partner violence? I'll just, tell you briefly, like we did a case once, there was actually a couple, a high school couple, because most of the funding that we get is to use it with younger people, and older people are people too. I think it would work just as well. But this couple came to us because they had a baby together, and one of them was physically abusing the other, and both of them came to us and said, we don't want to raise our child with this kind of violence in our relationship. And so we engaged the two of them, and the baby sat in the circle, and each of their parents sat in the circle, and there were aunts and uncles and grandmothers, and there was even a pastor. Anybody who's involved in that community around these people sit in the circle. And it turned out that so many amazing things came out of that. I mean, one of the things was that the couple was 2 women, and 2 young women, and one of the families knew that they were gay and the other family did not know. And they were all willing to talk about it, and after the mother got through her shock at realizing when her daughter's girlfriend was sleeping over that it was her daughter's girlfriend sleeping over, they worked it through. I mean, they were all sitting there in a circle, and there were a lot of really challenging feelings. And by the end of that, there were, I think, 14 people who had their hearts and eyes and ears on this couple, telling them that they cared about them, they cared about this baby, and they were willing, they had come up with an agreement about how they were going to move forward, so that if anything came to anything close to a physical altercation, they knew what they were going to do, they knew who they were going to go to. And to the extent that we followed it out, I think 5 months, they were doing really well with that agreement that they came up with. So that's the picture of what the community conferencing restorative justice could offer to these kinds of cases. What was most compelling to me when we started to try to do a project to get cases from local domestic violence programs is that 70% of people who are abused in relationships go back to the relationships. If everybody acknowledges that that's the case, we've got to, it seems, start to try something different so that when these 70% of people go back to a very problematic relationship, they've got other people helping them be safe. So with that, Eve?